Welcome to the Mind Vine podcast, where we challenge the stigma associated with mental illness through conversations about a variety of issues impacting mental health. Here we bring you news, views, and interviews that intrigue, educate, and celebrate recovery. Leading us on this journey are the hosts of the Mind Vine podcast, Darryl Mathers and Chris Bovie.
Welcome to the Mind Vine podcast. My name is Darryl Mathers, and I'm with my co-host, as always, Chris Bovie. And we have yet another special guest at the Mental Health for All conference that CMHA is hosting this week in Toronto. We've had a lot of great guests. I always love when people come and they can share their personal experience, and that's Brianne Moore. That's what you're here to do. Can you tell us, first of all, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for taking the time to join us. And you just finished a session here at the conference. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing?
Yeah, so I was speaking on this morning's keynote panel with a few other special members who came this week to discuss mental health, and they work in the community. And I was specifically discussing my own lived experience with mental illness and what I've seen in the system and how we can use the people who have been in the system to improve the system. You know, we're experts in the sense that we've been there, we know what works, we know what doesn't, and how we'd like to access our care.
Good. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience? So a little bit about your story, and then how you came to sort of be a peer or an advocate for others.
So I started struggling with mental health around 3 or 4 is when the doctor said I first experienced anxiety that wasn't really within a normal range, but I was 4 years old, and that's kind of hard to describe it for. Yeah. So I didn't talk about mental health up until I was 13 or 14 when I was diagnosed with depression, and later on I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, persistent depressive disorder, borderline personality disorder, and eating disorder not otherwise specified. So I got my diagnosis, and then from there I was able to receive treatment for what I was going through and try to get on the track to recovery. It's definitely been a long road. I have struggled with it for a very long time, but I'm a bit of an expert now in how to deal with my own emotions and how to keep myself well.
Well, one of the things I read about you, sorry Chris, one of the things I read about you is that when you were, I think it was when you were in high school, is when you really first started speaking about this, right? Like how so you're dealing with all this stuff, like the list of issues that you're dealt with is it's not no picnic for anybody, let alone a young person. And then on top of that, you're speaking to your peers about this in high school. Can you tell us what that was like?
So I actually started doing public speaking when I was at my lowest of lows. Like, I was really struggling. I had been suicidal at the time. And I was not doing well in school because I wasn't attending a lot of classes, but I decided to start sharing my story within my school. I was in a group called iMom, and we gave presentations to students in the school about mental health and how to help their friends, and through that I won the Royal Ottawa Youth Inspiration Award in 2015, and from there it kind of just took off. I was lucky enough that I was able to start sharing my story in high schools and at conferences, and just getting the word out there that recovery is possible, and using my story and what I've been through has been tremendously just over the moon, so amazing, because it's given a lot of my struggles a purpose, and I've been able to turn something that was really difficult into something that could maybe help someone else who's going through the same things.
So what was that process like for you? Because I know there's a lot of people that are going, struggling with mental illness that I'm not sure, there's a fear of disclosure, there's a fear of how will people judge me, and often the reality is actually more people come to support. But I guess for you, what was the process, or what advice can you give for someone that's not quite sure whether to, they want to help others, but they're afraid of disclosing or telling their story?
Telling my story and saying I was struggling with mental health, even just, coming out for the first time and saying, hey, I'm really struggling, it was a very difficult conversation to have, but it is the reason why I'm here today and why I'm doing so well, is saying I am struggling, I need support, and it is absolutely terrifying, and it was so scary, but now I'm just so glad I did it. And any advice I could give is don't be so scared coming forward and saying something, because it's going to be an amazing decision. And
were you surprised by the response before when you're sort of thinking, I'm going to do this? Sometimes we think about what's going to happen, but were you surprised maybe by the support that you didn't necessarily expect when you did disclose and talk about it?
I was, for sure. I think I was worried that I wasn't going to get the support that I needed, and that's maybe why I didn't come forward, was that I was so worried that I was just going to stay sick forever and I would never be able to live this fulfilling life, that I just stayed sad. But once I came forward and I saw the support that was available and that I could live this amazing life and do public speaking and have a full-time job, and I'm just so grateful I did. it's, again, the best decision I've ever made was saying, hey, I'm struggling, because I'm here today because of it.
Great.
I can't even imagine, because I think of what high school was like when I was there, and then you're laying it all out there.
Yeah.
And did you have people specifically come up to you and say, I am dealing with something, or confide in you?
100%. And that is what keeps me going and doing the speeches. Is I suffer from anxiety every single time I give a speech. Anytime I talk to anyone about mental health, I will still have a panic attack. Speaking in front of a bunch of people is absolutely terrifying. But I do it because those conversations are so important. And I've had people come up to me after and say, hey, thank you for telling your story. I'm going through the same thing. Or how do I access services? And, what do I do if I'm struggling with this? I am struggling with a similar diagnosis and I'm lost and I don't know what to do. So being able to just be that, I guess, connector for someone else and saying it's okay. And just, again, there's power in speaking to someone who's going through the same things that you're going through. And yeah.
Do you feel like you get energized by that experience? Like, I think about what you've gone through, and you share, and then somebody else shares, and they share, and there's commonality. Like, does it really get you going? I guess?
For sure, yeah. There is so much power in telling your story, and every time we talk about mental health, whether it's in front of one person or 1,000 people or hundreds and hundreds of people, we are starting a conversation, and that's what's important. So at the end of the day, as long as we're talking about mental health and we're saying, hey, I'm struggling, but I'm here and I got the help and there's help available, that at the end of the day, we're doing what we need to do to reduce stigma and make mental health services easier to access.
That's great. And when you go to schools, often kids are just looking for that one moment where they can disclose. Like, when you speak, it's almost like it's okay, and it's like, here's my opportunity to talk to someone. But how do you find, I've seen sort of a mixture in schools that sometimes they're afraid of someone like you going there because, oh my God, what's going to happen? Even though the kids are already struggling, they're kind of worried about that disclosure and the risk and things. Do you struggle out with that, or are the schools pretty receptive to?
Everyone's pretty receptive. I've never had any issues with people being nervous about disclosure or schools not receiving me well. I think it's been I'm really lucky to be invited into high schools. The first person I actually talked to about struggling with mental illness was my guidance counselor. So the schools are very, very helpful. If I could give any advice to anyone in high school, it would be use the services that are available, because they're there and they are helpful. And obviously it's confidential to use the services. So.
Right. I was going to ask, sorry, do you also, and we've talked about different things that kids have access to. And we talked about 13 Reasons Why a while ago. But do you talk to kids a little bit about they're bombarded with all these types of things, social media and everything that to trying to get information and what's out there on TV and that. Do you talk to kids a little bit about sifting through the quagmire of information to get the right, appropriate messaging and help?
For sure. I think there's a lot on social media that can be scary or hard to deal with, and can be very upsetting. I still struggle with it, and I have to myself take breaks from Twitter and social media from time to time, because I find that it does get me in a spot where I don't feel so great. But just know, in a world of technology and being in high school, you're still allowed to take time for yourself, and it's okay to step back from those things. And that doesn't mean you're any less popular or that there's something wrong with you. It's okay to not want to be a part of that group, and I really struggle with that. I was cyberbullied a lot as well growing up, and I felt like I had to be on social media because that's what everyone was doing. But there are times that it can be dangerous, and it's not the safest place to be sometimes when you are struggling with mental illness, because you can't get away from that social media. There is no way to get out of it. It follows you everywhere. So yeah, just take a break and do what's right for you.
No, it sounds like you're doing great work.
Yeah.
Really thank you for taking the time to join us. If people, I know you're doing a lot of speaking engagements. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can do that?
I do have a Twitter handle, so that's at Meet Bri, just BRI. And if you want to get in touch with me about a conference or a speaking gig, or just have any questions, you can reach out to me there.
Great. Well, thank you very much
Thank
for
you
joining
for
us.
having
Really
me.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Cool.
Okay, you're not-
Begins and ends with